I'm George Boiter and I'm a watercolour artist, and I'm here on Loch Duich in the Highlands of Scotland. Behind me you can see the shoreline and the mountains of Glen Shiel behind, and that's what I'm going to paint this morning. So my drawing is complete. I now need to work out my strategy for executing the painting. The painting is about the mood and the grandeur of the scenery. It's not about colour. I want to get some of the stillness of the morning. There's barely a breeze over this water. It's like a mirror. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some very light tone on this foreground water so that it has time to dry. While that's drying, I'll then do the sky and try and get something of the nature of those clouds in. I'm not going to copy them. And then I'll be left with the two mid-tones to do and the dark tones. Always working from light to dark, and I'm working on Saunders Waterford 140-pound paper. Okay, so first of all is let's get this foreground water on here. It's very smoky grey. I'll start with a little bit of cobalt blue and the leftovers, of course. Leftovers are very important. So we're getting some. I need a quantity of this because I want the paper to absorb it and take a little bit of time to dry. It won't take long because it's really quite warm this morning. Midges are out. Smoky blue, that's what we're after. And hey, well, that's interesting. We've got a couple of divers that have just emerged from the Loch. So I'll just take my time. I want this nice smoky blue. A bit more of that in there. A bit of neutral grey here, and balance that with a tiny more touch of cobalt. Let's see what happens here. I can always dilute that. And then when I get here, I want some nice streaks. And yeah, dry brush here. Dryer brush. Some tissue and just look at that. And I think also going to give it a little spray, just open it out a bit. And that just takes a little bit of the glare off it. Okay. Now, sky. So we've got just a touch of blue here and then very bright clouds, so the clouds are going to have to be white paper. I'll do this as a mix of cobalt blue a bit of cobalt blue there, and maybe a little bit of cerulean, and this will be a dryish brush, so I get a broken edge around the clouds. And then inside the clouds I'll need to wet those and drop in some grey. So let's just see. Yeah. Tiny touch of cool grey in that. I mustn't make the mistake of just getting involved in the actual sky that's in front of me. That would be a mistake. I need to do is get something like the sky. So you can see I'm using this broken edge. And a bit of scumbling, really. Bit of scumbling. Now I'll give it a little spray. But I need that very bright white edge. And now what I'll do is I'll wet the inside of the clouds. And then I'll introduce some grey into it. That's how I hope to do it. Let's see if it works. So, some neutral grey in here. See what happens if I put that in. And I want it to settle down. Bit here and there. Just not to get too complicated with it. I'll just wet some edges, soften these edges. Break them up a little bit. tricky doing skies. Terrible temptation to over elaborate. If you feel you've caught the nature of it, that's the time to get out. I'll just soften a couple more edges, and as I see them, slight hard edges here and there. I don't necessarily want to see. You need some darks, but also I'm judging this against pure white, so you got to aim off for that. Okay. Well, I think that'll do. Okay, so we've now got this foreground done. We've got our sky. I'm just softening another edge there. Just soften a few little areas here. And right, okay, now we are ready to do this mid-ground. It's quite a light tone, this. So I shall try to decide what is the actual... The tone is more important than the colour. But I need lots of pigment, so fortunately I've got quite a lot of water mixed with the leftovers here. What I'm looking at looks colder than that. Cooler, anyway. So let's put some of this in. I'm still working on the first wash, really. And everything I do here in this mid-tone area, those two mid-tones, will be, once it's dried, because I have to let it dry, that will be the lightest tone in that distance once I go into wet and wet phase. It's a balance between the warmth of the green that you know is there and is going to emerge in due course, and the fact that when we look at this, half close your eyes, it's a very smoky, cool colour. But the cools are principally in the shadow areas, and in the slightly lit sides it's warmer. Anyway, that's what my observation says. But I just need to get enough pigment here that I can execute this in one. So just working this up. Pick up a little bit of lavender as well. That gives you a nice smoky effect. Neutralizes any warmth. Do a little bit of that. Looks about right. Do I have enough? Probably not. You never quite have enough pigment ready, but anyway, time to go. So this is so I may have to use the spray here. There's a bit of lavender on the side of the brush. bit of an edge. Tiny touch of blue, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of that. That was some light neutral grey. I'm just going to cross the top of the ridge here. Just going to give that a spray. Keep it workable. And what I can do is I can put in a bit of warmth. Seem to be spraying it around a bit. So there we are. A bit of raw sienna. We'll warm it up. I have to turn these into birds later. And as I come down, I'll just get a little bit more warmth in this. A bit of yellow. And we'll get in here with this. There we are. It's going to be quite fun. Raw sienna. A bit more for this foreground area. Another little spray just to keep it all workable. So as you can see, cooler tops and to the mountains, I should say. And then we get into this area here where it's quite a bit warmer. I'll just take that along there. I like some of these little sparkly bits. And this is cadmium yellow with a touch of cobalt turquoise in there, and here. We'll have some of this up here because I'll need some bright highlights on these trees, not much, but just enough to give us an understanding that the trees are catching some sunlight. So there we are. And I'll put in some darker notes here. Warmer, richer burnt sienna in here. As it comes towards us, warmer colours advance towards us. Got a bit of cooler colours recede. Almost goes without saying, but here we are. And then foreground. I'll leave it at that. So there is our wash done, and I'll need to let that dry completely before I carry on with the next stage. So my wash is dried, and I've now got a tonal and colour arrangement here that I have to build on. These are all light tones, and I now work on the mid-tones, working towards the dark tones. What I have to remember is that what's in front of me is just a reference. I'm not copying it. I am using it as reference and inspiration, really. So the light on the subject matter has changed since we first set up, and so I'm now going to do the midtones as I see them in front of me. And in this case, the mountains have got more form. Formerly, at the beginning of the painting, it was just really a flat, light mid-tone. Now there's form because the sun has come up and it's catching some areas, and there's shadow in other areas. So that's what I need to do, but it mustn't be laborious. I've got to keep some lively brushwork. But let's see if I get the tones right. I'm going to judge the tone from this little area here, because that's a light, far away, distant tone, and against it, almost exactly the same tone, is the edge of this mountain, and that is going to carry on right across the top here. So I need enough pigment that I don't run out, and what I'm mixing here is some raw sienna and cobalt blue, and I'm putting in a touch of lavender because that gives me, it neutralizes any colour, and until I am sure, I'm going to keep things quite neutral. So I'm going to put a dab here and see how I feel about that, and if I like it, which I can do, I'll get in here with this lot here. I still think it needs a little bit more ultramarine blue in here. And I'm sticking to the mop because I happen to think that that'll give me a looser feel, and that's what I'm after. Too many complications there. I'll bring that down, and I'm going to give it a little spray so I can keep working on it. Okay, we come up here, and then we've got quite a deep shadow here. Some warmth in there, and then there's some cooler shadow area here. Come down this side of the mountain, and always we've got some it's all very subtle here. Now, we're just on the borderline between warm and cool, so I am trying to reflect that in my choice of colours. Up at the top of this, I may go to a sable brush, and you can see that most of my colouring here is really pretty pretty dark. Well, pretty. It's kind of toned grey, isn't it? It's a lovely sharp ridge there. Yeah, I'm going to pick up some slightly darker, thicker pigment here and just pop it in and let it disperse. If I do this now, then I hope it will give a little bit of shape to the mountain. Back into the ochre and in there, and then I'll go into the blue, into the cooler shadow. I'm also trying to make sure that I don't get too diluted in the pigment. I have to keep the pigment to water ratio in mind as I do this. Okay, so too watery, then it will give me a bit of a colour flare, which I don't really want. I'll just get a little spray here. And what that does is it buys you a little bit of time. And I can. So this is working wet and wet. It's quite subtle. I've got sharp line there, sharp edge. So I want that sharp edge, but I want it to be diffused now. And so I go into the warm side of this palette that I've currently got and pick up that edge. Just get a few of these bits and so far so good, as I like to say. And I think I need to go back in here with some darker pigment. A little bit of blue, a little bit of cool grey. spray, but I also need a touch of that just to neutralise it, maybe a little bit of lavender. A bit more blue. That'll do it. A bit more ultramarine in here. I'm putting this into fairly wet. Into wet. Okay, I think maybe so this is all still wettish, and it means I can tint it a bit. This is all wet into wet, and okay, so now we've got this foreground hill, and it's warmer and a bit more substantial in tonal terms compared to the others. So I'll go in here with some a bit more form in this. It turns around the corner here and we get some interesting blue shadows. Yeah, there's got some blue shadows here, definite blue. That's ultramarine I'm picking up. And let's just try a little bit of this, maybe a little bit more lavender, just to thicken up the mixture. A little bit of burnt sienna, and balance it with some ultramarine blue. Let's see if that gives us something. Yes, that's better. Yeah. There we go. So ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, ochre, ultramarine blue, and some nice things happening here. In the shadows, there's really, I can see quite a lot of ultramarine blue. And we can, as long as there's strong, thick enough pigment, I can almost draw with this. You know? And along here there's some nice details. I have to try and let the brush do the work. Just a few little marks here, and you can see I'm using the brush in a different way now. Side of the brush here. Let's pick out some detail along here. And I just picked up some water there just to take the tone back a little bit, and then we move into this area. So I'll mix up some more ultramarine blue, some little bit of yellow ochre, a bit of burnt sienna, a bit more blue, and thicker pigment. I'll come back to these sparkly bits. I'm just going to leave them there just now. Of course, this is our area of interest here. This area. Just soften some of those edges, I think. I'll give it a little spray. And let's carry this through. Into this area here now. I can see a little bit more green here. So I'll pick up some cadmium yellow, a little bit of cobalt turquoise, ochre. See what we've got here. And so we're well into wet and wet here. This is letting the brush do some of the work. I'll pick up some ultramarine blue and drop that in, because we do have a stronger edge. And a suggestion of some trees there. Okay. Picking up some burnt sienna and ultramarine blue here. neutral mixture, and just a bit of shaping. Along the shoreline. Okay. Just a little bit of interest there. So I've now got this mid-ground foreshore here, and that's much darker than the background. So I'm going to have to thicken up my pigment here for this. It's much thicker pigment. A few birds in the sky there. And okay, let's mix some thick pigment for this middle ground. So burnt sienna, yellow ochre, a little bit of cobalt turquoise. Keep it on the green side because we know that there's quite a bit of green there. Ultramarine blue, and you can see my pigment is thickening up. More burnt sienna, more ultramarine blue. Let's keep going on the mixing. I think it can still go darker. I'll use some neutral grey here. Neutral grey takes the tone down but doesn't affect the actual hue. So I'm just trying to judge some of this colour and tone against the adjoining ones. I'll just keep it lively there and pick up some of just need the character of these trees. Don't need to paint them in detail. There we go. This is our main tree here, so let me just see if I can get that one in. Upstroke, just to reflect the nature of the tree. And this could be darker still, something down at the base. There's one a little bit further away in the distance there. It's not quite as dark. But I'll just pop that in there because I can see it. here. Here I want some brightish green. So that's cobalt turquoise and cadmium yellow in here. Get a nice soft edge. And mix on the paper. But I need some darks in there, so I'll go for this very small mop. Yeah. And I'll mix some ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, same three until I get it. Neutral grey. I'm going to go for a bit of Viridian. I very rarely use Viridian. It's a dangerous colour. But I need a yeah, I need that. And just yeah. We'll do that. There's a bit of shadow there, so I'll pick up a bit of ultramarine blue and just join these things together. Okay, now we get here. And I'm going to just put in the darks of some stones here. So here are some stones. And when you're doing something like this, it's a kind of calligraphy, really. You're not doing the stones that are in front of you, you're just, in a sense, you're just using them as an observation point. But I think we could do with some nice contrast here. I'll come back to this later. Okay, so far, so good. So now you can see that I've done all of these mid-tones on the land part. I now have to get these reflections to just make the thing come alive. And you'll remember that earlier on I did I wet this and just put a tone in there. I need to go darker, this tone here should be certainly at least as dark as that, if not very slightly darker. So I need to do that now. I need to also think about this area being, we've got this nice lovely ochre-y seaweed on it. And so I'm thinking about how to do that. Just try something here, which is I'm taking some yellow ochre, dabbing it off the brush, and yeah, there you are, just enough to give us that feeling that there is some of that seaweed there. There's some bits of it here. And there's more of it here. So drier brush. Drier. Maybe even a bit of orange. Cadmium orange. But I need a dry brush. And there is some of our shoreline interest. Just some dry brush. Okay, so I still need to attend to the water. So let's see. I'll mix up, probably in here, I'll mix up the colour that I want. It's slightly cooler and than the mountains that it's reflecting. But there's an area there that I want to preserve. There's an area there. Okay. And I'm going to make this so I'm adding, I just want to get a little bit deeper in tone, not necessarily in colour. So I'm picking up some violet here and adding it in, some ultramarine blue, some cool grey, and what I'll do is I'll mix up some thicker pigment, ultramarine blue, violet, cool grey. I'll give a touch of warmth with some burnt sienna. That will a bit too much. And what I now need to do is watch for the right point at which I pop this pigment in to the wet paint that's there. I need to get this right on the button. I want to get some soft waves. In here. And for this I need thick enough pigment that that it just melts into what's there beforehand, but I also need to at the same time exploit this area here to get these reflections. A bit more ultramarine blue. Coming down here, and getting some broken edges now. Well, I think that's our wet and wet phase over, and what I'll go on to next is some dry brush strokes. Yep, that's the wet and wet finished. Okay, so now we're into finishing. We're in the finishing straight here with some dry brush strokes. In fact, you can see that this is not a dry brush stroke at all. This is me just still, while there's some dampness on the water area, I am putting in some very soft ripples. And while I'm here, I am going to just pop in a strong green on that area of foreshore in the distance there. About here. I think it probably needs that, just for a dash of colour, catch your attention. Well, yeah, I think it made a difference. I do. There we are. And I feel like there's just a tiny little bit I need to do here. Maybe in your way. Okay, where do I need to apply these dry brush strokes? I need a little bit more form here. So I'll resuscitate this dark green that I've got here. Add a little bit more cool grey. there. Maybe a touch of burnt sienna. And let's see if I can just tease a few little accents and darks out, which I think every painting needs contrast, and that's really what I'm trying to do here. And there's still quite a lot of work that you can do in the darks. You can work darks quite a lot. Mustn't be afraid of the darks. So this you tend to do almost by instinct. It's hard to describe what's going through my head as I do this. Yeah, it's an instinctive feel for contrast. Maybe there's some darks here, just a few little accents. But you get to the point of diminishing returns because you start looking for things to do when there are none anymore. And I feel like this is almost finished. Burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, it's nearly always those two. And a bit of
No, so basically just going to enjoy yourselves and see what you see and you think of that. Fantastic. I mean, are you on this Loch? Oh, right, okay.
it'll give it more depth if there's darker darks here. I want this to go further away from us. So these are undoubtedly dry brush strokes. And so I'll just take a quick check over the rest of the painting. There could be need for just a tiny dash of contrasting white for a building in the foreground, in the background. Right about there. So any little points of emphasis, that's it really. Could do with something darker here. So that's. I'm just mixing up a very dark ultramarine based tone, and I'm going to put some more in here as well. Something darker. Yep. Just a little bit more depth. We're nearly there. Very nearly there. A bit of colour here. Just a little bit more life. Okay, step back, and yeah, we're finished. Here we are, finished painting of early morning light on Loch Duich in the mountains of Glenshiel in the Highlands of Scotland.